In this tutorial, let's put together everything we've done so far. So custom events, custom variables. We learned that we can run another actor's code from a different actor. And we've also learned the basics of collision. So now let us learn how we can run code using these collisions. Remember I said collisions have a bunch of features or a functionality. One of them is physics, that's what we looked at. The other was overlap events. Let's look at those now. All I've done is I've made this new actor called BP collision test. If we open it up, there is absolutely nothing in here. In the viewport, there is nothing here as well. There's just a default scene root. So let's start building up our little collision. To do any collision, we need a collider. So let's just add that in here. And I know that this collider is the only thing I'm going to need, so I've made it the root. I don't need the scene root. Next, I'm just going to set the hidden in-game to off. So this isn't necessary. This is just so that we can see our colliders while we're learning about it. And finally, this is very important. Under our collision settings, this defaults to true, but we always want to make sure generate overlap events is checked for any object that is participating in overlap events. This is true for this box, which has the functionality, and this is going to be true for any object that collides with the box. So only if both those objects have this setting checked on will our overlap event generate. Let's move on to the event graph. You might notice when you make your blueprint that an actor began overlap function is there. I've just deleted it here so I can show us putting it back in. I right click, search began overlap, and under add event collision actor began overlap. I'm not looking for component began overlap. I'm looking for actor began overlap, which is the whole actor, and it adds it in there. What this function really is it fires the frame that these two actors start intersecting. It only happens once, and that is the moment they begin intersecting. There is an opposite function to this called end overlap, and this runs once the frame these two objects stop colliding. So if I was to just print string and print out begin, print string, and print end, compile this, and in our level I have already dragged this BP collision test. All I'm going to do is make it nice and big so that this physics ball, which is going to simulate physics and it's going to fall downwards, so it's going to go through this collision now. What should happen is when it starts touching it, we should print begin when it goes through it, so when it first touches it, and when it exits it, we should print end. Let's see this in action. I hit simulate, ball falls down, but nothing prints. Just like I said, very important. So when I click on this ball and I go down to its collision settings, its generate overlap events is turned off. We need to turn that on. Now, when we run it, it prints begin, then it prints end. Let's just take a quick look at that again. Cool, that worked great. So now you can see when something collides with our collider, it runs these two functions. We can use this on our player as well. So I'm just going to take this collider, let's just scale it so it's more size for our player. Let's set it somewhere. And in the world settings, let's just make sure that in our game mode override, we have just set it to our GM first person, so that that's using the pawn that we have created. Now when I hit play, I'm possessing my first person character. Let's run through this overlap, or this collider. You can see when I enter it, it says begin, and nothing is happening when I'm in the collider. But when I leave it, it says end. So when we enter, begin, leave, end. And we can just run through here and see it a bunch. Cool. So now let's use this and let's make our player respawn when they touch this collider. Let's just take a moment and think about how we want this to work. It's always good for us to, instead of just directly diving into writing code, to just think about it a little bit, maybe write it down, the steps that we want, break down our problem so that we can build it back up again. This is a very simple problem. All I want is I have my player, that's this capsule here, and I have a collision that's represented in red. My player has some spawn location. This is the location they start at when we hit play. When our player goes and collides with this trigger, all I want to do is set them back to the spawn location. So that's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. When I think about the steps that I need, I think one, in begin play, so when the game starts, I just want to store their spawn location. And I want to store this in a variable. Then, when the player collides with the death zone, we just want to set their current location to spawn location. So you can see the functionality is very simple, but it's always a good task to try and write down our problems, try and break them down so that we can solve smaller chunks rather than trying to use our brain power to solve the whole problem. Now we just need to deal with these 3 separate issues, and that should give us our system that we want. So to begin, our first step was to store the spawn location. To do that, I'm going to go into our BP first person character. I said that we're going to store our spawn location in a variable. So let's make a new variable and make sure it's set to vector, and always give it a reasonable name. I'm going to call this spawn for spawn location. Let's compile it. The default value is 0, 0, 0, but what I really want its value to be is our player's location when they start. Conveniently, the event begin play runs once when we start the game, so we can use that. So I'm going to pull this out, set it, and what do I want to set it as? If I just search get actor location, you can see there's a function called get actor location, which returns a vector that is going to be the current position of our player. In begin play, that is the same as our spawning location. So we're just going to set our spawn location to that. So now when we run it, instead of being 0, 0, 0, it should be wherever our player spawns, which is great. Next, if we look at this, we want to, when the player collides with the death zone, set their current location to the spawn location. Let's deal with this third step first. I'm going to make a new function here, and I'm just going to call it respawn. And all that's going to happen on respawn is we are going to set the actor location, and it has a new location input. What is that location? It is the spawn location. So now we have a custom function that all it does is when we run it, it sets the actor location to the spawn location. Just a quick note, you guys can do this as a function. We could also come here and make a custom event and call that respawn. We can't call it respawn just because we have a function called respawn, but the point is that we can also have a custom event, so I could call this respawn event instead. And we can run this exact same code here. So in this case, this is what I mean by events and functions are slightly interchangeable. I'm just going to show you this in a function because I already have this set up here. So that's the third step dealt with. We have a function that lets us set our current location to the respawn location. And lastly, all we need to do is call this an actor begin overlap. So I'm going to delete these. We don't have to deal with end overlap. We only have to deal with begin overlap. So this is one important concept in Unreal. You can see here that the output data pin is an actor object reference. So what Unreal is saying is this data type is just a generic actor. This could represent any actor, but really it is just representing the generic actor type, the parent class, not our very specific child classes. So this, my parent might be an actor, but this is a very specific type of actor called BP first person character that I made. This respawn functionality that I put in here, this is not in any actor. This is only in this actor, the BP first person character. So this other actor does not know about this respawn function because it's just a generic actor. So if I search respawn here, respawn, respawn. Nothing pops up because an actor reference, just a generic actor reference, does not know about that function. Only our BP first person character knows about that function. This is a very important concept. We can go around this by just simply telling Unreal, hey, this actor object reference, I know that it's going to be a first person character, and so I want you to treat it as that. To do that, all we do is we pull out the other actor node and we type cast. You can see there are a ton of things. Basically, every actor class that we have in Unreal, we can cast to it. And this is everything that Unreal makes, as well as everything we customly create. And again, all casting is doing is telling Unreal, hey, this generic actor type, treat it as this very specific actor type. In my case, it's going to be a BP, first person character. And you can see it has two nodes, two execution pins. One, this is when the cast succeeds. This is when the cast fails. So when the cast fails, I'm just going to print out failed. We'll see why this might happen later. But assuming the cast succeeds, you can see this data pin says as BP first person character. So no longer is this just an actor object reference. This is a BP first person character object reference, a very specific reference. And this one knows about its respawn function. So when I search respawn, I can see it there. So first we need to cast to this character. That's the only way we can use this respawn function. This is a fairly important thing to know. I do just want to point out, do not worry about casting in this class, but if you guys are looking to be gameplay programmers, casting is not the best way to do things because again, as we can see here, this cast could fail. And that's going to lead to unintended behavior in our code. If you are interested, there'll be a resource link up, but what we want to look at for communications is, or communicating between actors, is something called blueprint interfaces. But really, please throw that out of your head for this class. Let's just use casting. Casting is perfectly fine. If you're just looking to write better code and want to be a gameplay programmer, I would say this is not the best method, but we're looking to make functional games, and this is perfectly fine here. So all we're telling Unreal is when we begin overlap, we're telling it, hey, Unreal, this is not just any generic actor. This is my BP first person character. Why are we telling it that? Because this respawn function is only in this character. And so we can now call this respawn function. And so now this should work as intended. I'm going to hit play, find my collider, and let's just run into it. And you can see we have respawned back at our starting location. The nice thing about the way we have done it is if I take this player's start and I was to move it somewhere else and hit play. So now we have spawned somewhere else, and if I was just to run into this collider, it respawns us back to where we started. So that's pretty nice. Wherever we spawn, we don't have to change our code to affect it. It's just going to work. So that's a nice convenient feature. Now, I just want to point out this over here in our casting, we had a failed component attached to it. And let's just understand a bit about this failed component. Earlier, we saw this sphere falling through the collider, and that triggered the collision event, as well as our player. So our collider doesn't really know what's colliding with it. It just knows something has collided with it, and it triggers that function. So only when our BP first person character collides with this will this cast succeed, because that is the BP first person character. Anything else that collides with this is going to fail. And this is an error. You could leave this like this, but this is actually an error. We don't want this cast to even happen if we don't know that it's the player. Let's just, one, see this in action, and two, look at one way around this. So if I was to take my ball again and put it above this collider, now when we simulate it, what's going to happen is it's going to try and cast the sphere into the first person character. That is not going to work, so it should just print failed. So let's do that. You can see it says failed. I don't want this code to run at all, honestly. I don't even want it to cast to the first person character without knowing that it's the first person character. And we're just going to learn one more quick thing in this tutorial to help alleviate that, and that is known as tagging. This is a very simple thing. So in our first person character, I'm going to make sure to select the root root of the thing, so the actor itself, and I'm just going to search tag. And you can see there's a bunch of types of tags, but we're looking for actor tag. And here I'm just going to name this player. All a tag is a little string that is associated with our player. This specific BP first person character has a tag player. And why is this useful? Well, in our other actor, we can, instead of just directly casting, let's pull out other actor and let's search has tag. Actor has tag. And then here we can search player. So if actor has this tag, we're going to return true. If actor doesn't have this tag, we're going to return false. We can use a branch node, plug this in as its condition. And now only if the actor has the player tag true, let us cast to the first person character, which is going to be this other object. If the actor does not have this, we don't want to do anything. And so now, even though this cast failed is here, if I was to compile this, and I was to hit play here, it doesn't say failed because it's not even checking. This actor does not have a tag player. We don't care about it. But if I was to run my player into it, which has that tag, you can see that the respawn functionality still works. So I know we might have looked at a lot of concepts today. They all go together. One is the overlap event. The other is casting. And finally is checking the tag. But really, these three things go hand in hand. Usually when we overlap with something, first we're going to check its tag so we know what to do with it. And then we're going to cast to it so we can use the functionality that we've built into it. Lastly, before I stop this tutorial, I just wanted to mention this tagging. It's case sensitive. So player with a capital P is a very different tag to player with a small p. My suggestion for you guys would just be have a convention and stick to it. If you capitalize all your first letter of every word, do that. If you don't capitalize the first letter of your words, then don't do that. But just be consistent, because if I was to type small p over here, small player, which is different to our actual tag, which has a big P to start with, Unreal won't even tell me that that's an issue. It's just not gonna, say anything about it, and it's kind of frustrating to go back later and look at where you might have misspelled tags. So my suggestion is just be consistent. Think of one standard for yourself. If you're working on a team, agree on a standard with each other and stick to it. This has been a quick video on how we can use colliders and build a small kill box for our player that respawns them. Thank you for watching.